All right. Ooh, my microphone is hot, hot, hot. That should be better. All right. Well, we're gonna try something new today. I haven't done a live stream, I think, in like 5 years. Probably since I published my book, the Tiny MBA, where we did. It was during the pandemic, and we used live streams to do like book tours and stuff. So this is. I've got the rig. I've fired OBS back up, and we're gonna try some stuff today. If you are hanging out and you want to jump in the chat over on YouTube, is where I'm at. I'm gonna try and keep an eye on chat. But as always, be a good citizen. Be kind to your fellow chat mates, and of course to me. Otherwise, I will kick you out. No tolerance for bullshit. Basically, ask good questions, take good answers. That's the promise here. So here's kind of what I'm thinking. If there is anybody in the chat, I would love just a note that things actually look good and sound good. You can see what's going on, because I'm not 100% sure. And actually, you know what? While we're doing this, I'm just going to do a quick test from my phone and make sure this is working like it's supposed to. Anybody in the chat? Looks good, sounds good. All right, cool. Well, then I'm just gonna skip over my test here. I'm gonna shoot a quick text message, and then we're gonna get started. For those of you who are here, let's see. Let's see who's here. Looks good, sounds good. Thanks, Victor Summer. Bash, awesome. Tuning in South Carolina, super interested in what you're building. Diagnosed with ADHD, trying to build solutions with that in mind. Awesome. Yo, Tankmaster, I got my ADHD diagnosis a couple of years ago, and here's what I'll say. The systems that I've built here are very much for my brain, which is an ADHD brain for sure, and who knows what other kind of neurodivergence. But the thing that really really crushes me on the day-to-day is any kind of open loop where I do a thing, but in order to do the next thing, I'm waiting on somebody else or something else to happen. And those open loops, I have a very hard time letting go of those open loops because I worry that I'm going to never come back to them. And I've had a really hard time finding ways to make sure that that doesn't happen. So this is a little bit like the object permanence part of ADHD, but it's even worse than that, where like the stress of the open loop like kind of makes it impossible for me to think about anything else. And so what the system has become for me is a place for me to put things and trust that that won't happen, which is something that I've never quite had before. So like I said, I'm going to shoot a quick text and then we're going to get started. I'm going to explain what's on my screen because it's going to get a little bit meta here. I actually used my tool to prep for this stream, and I want to show you how I did it because it's pretty cool. And the like tools and pieces that I used. Let's see here. I gotta text a buddy who I was supposed to call in a little bit, and let's see, 8, 9. You might be asking yourself, why don't you have your assistant text for you? And that is one of my hard rules, is that I don't use this tool to send messages on my behalf. We'll talk more about that when we're talking about like ethics and values and boundaries and stuff like that. All right, let's get this started for real. I see we've got a handful of folks here. Let's check in with the chat again before I get started. Very similar to what I'm dealing with. The ability to build bespoke solutions is one of the craziest, most exciting unlocks. Yeah, I mean, if you've been following along on my tweets the last couple of days, that's really kind of been my realization. And I guess for some context here, I do technically have a background as a software developer. I haven't been paid to write code in like 20 years. My job when I first got started was as a web developer. So my background is more like the front end stuff, so HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then I like put it all down 20 years ago and really just used basic skills to build like static pages for my businesses and occasionally like tooling and things like that, but more stuff like Zapier is like, I guess what it comes down to is like I have a programmer brain, I can think in systems, but writing code was never a good use of my time, especially as a business owner. And Claude Code has kind of collapsed that for me, where, before I would have to like spend a lot of time to figure out a prototype, and I could, but it was just not good use of my time, or I'd have to work with a developer, which I actually really like, and I will still hire developers for sure. But often like the feedback loop is really slow because I'd have an idea of what I want to do, and I'd have to like do a bunch of work to write down what that is, give it to somebody, hope they understood it correctly, hope I asked for it correctly, and then get things back. And there's iteration cycles were just so slow for me to even know if the thing was worth building. And the thing that's got me so excited here is the fact that I can really quickly prototype something with my own hands sort of being extended by this robot. And it's pretty nuts. And I want to say like the ecosystem of open source is in such an interesting place right now because it is in many ways so essential to what's going on. But it is also being like, I don't want to say crushed by what's going on, but I'm seeing this stuff with Tailwind and whatnot. And so like a lot of things are changing, and I'm trying to pay a lot of attention. I want to talk more about that again, sort of like the ethics side of the conversation stuff that I want to share. So what I've got up on my screen right now is the JFDI system, at least part of it. And I wanted to start here where I'm just going to show you how I prepped for this. So I used this to look at my Twitter replies and my YouTube comments from the last like 6 weeks as I've been sharing this stuff and pull all the questions, including stuff that I've replied to, as well as stuff that I haven't yet replied to. And I said, hey, go get all that stuff and bring it back for me. And this is a good example of like the prep work that would normally stop me from doing a thing like a live stream. Is I'd probably have to sit down for an hour and go back through, maybe more than an hour, go back through all these tweets and replies, open a bunch of tabs, read through them, pick which ones to respond to, kind of deduplicate them, and then like give myself an itinerary or a roadmap or anything like that. And that like, you could see how that could easily take an hour and a half or more before I even sit down to press record. And instead, I loaded up my JFDI system. I opened up a blank chat and I said, hey, use Twitter. And right here, the @Twitter is actually linking to a Twitter skill. And that Twitter skill is wrapped around this amazing little CLI tool that Pete on Twitter and is doing like the Claudebot stuff. His GitHub is full of all these amazing little CLI tools for popular stuff like Twitter and all the Google apps and stuff like that. And so it's already authenticated to my Twitter, and it's got the skills to go work with the Twitter like an unofficial API effectively. So I don't even get hit with the API limitations. And it loads up the skill and it goes looking through my replies, finds stuff, and within 90 seconds brought back a summary of questions for today's live stream. Again, that would have taken me an hour and a half, and I don't think I would have done as good of a job. I easily would have missed stuff. So it pulled back questions and who asked them. Let me pull up the bird. GitHub .ip bird. So this is the bird repo that I was talking about. This is super easy to install, very, very powerful. And honestly, if Pete's not on your radar, like he's doing like the Claudebot stuff, I think a lot of people know about. I don't know how many people have gone to his like overview page. All these projects are these amazing little CLI tools, and like it feels like the glue to pull all this stuff together. So like if you haven't already checked out his repo's full of really, really good stuff. I've benefited from this tremendously. Pete also seems like just like a really nice guy who's like fun and interesting. So obviously we haven't met. I don't know the guy, but Pete, thank you for all these contributions. Like this has saved me incredible amounts of time. So it pulls all these down, and I said, great, include the links with each one. And so it went ahead and did all that. And I said, cool, save these to a file, put this, and I have a meeting section, which we'll get into in a second. So basically put it there, that'll be my roadmap. And at minimum, that gives me like a place to stash things for a little while. And then I was like, well, I had a bunch of great replies and questions on YouTube as well, which was honestly, I've never really had any kind of feedback loop on YouTube before. So that was new for me. And actually I built another tool for my co-working community over the last few days that used the YouTube API. So I was like, I know you've got a key for that. Go hunt down those comments and basically do the same thing. So again, this is all within maybe 5 minutes. And I think in between I ran and made myself a cup of coffee or something like that. So it pulls the comments, and I was like, hey, is that all the comments or just the comments that I haven't replied to? Because that's like another thing. YouTube has definitely built some decent tools for folks to like manage their comment section, but especially for somebody who's a total newbie like me, I'm still very much learning there. So I pulled all the comments, and I said, hey, can you deduplicate them? And so like across, now I've got replies on Twitter and YouTube. I said, cool, find the questions that have been repetitive, dedupe them, but make sure we get credit from each person. So you can see, here's something I got from, 2 people, 3 people, all YouTube, so on and so forth. So again, it's gathering and I'm reading, and it's not like doing the work, but it's making it really easy for me to kind of like start loading this stuff into my human working memory and start thinking about this while I'm working on whatever my next steps are going to be. This is such a different workflow from what I'm used to, and it's pretty nuts. So I said, all right, this is in here, 35 comments, 24 unique questions. Biggest clusters are around open source and GitHub, how to build tutorials, agent SDK versus Claude Code, hosting and architecture. Interesting. And I said, can you put together like a logical progression for me to cover? Because again, that's another thing that I would want to do if I was doing this all on my own, and realize like, rarely do I expect this to give me exactly what I want, but if it can give me 85% and I can do the last 15 massaging either manually or through back and forth with the assistant, which I've named mine Andy, which is a bit of an inside joke for Indie Hall, but Andy is the name of the actual agent, my main like executive assistant agent. So ask Andy all this stuff, pulls back this sort of progression where it goes through, the problem, why I built this, the architecture overview, Claude Code versus SDK, the memory system deep dive, building native apps with Claude Code, which is something that's brand new to me. I did that like in the last couple days. The Smog Twitter bookmark tool that I open sourced, I guess it's December, January, over the holidays. And then stuff about like safety and guardrails, and then how to get started. This is a good flow. Like it logically makes sense, but I was like, I already had a couple of things that I knew I wanted to cover. And I mentioned that in the tweet that I kind of linked to when I came here. And I said, I want to focus on these things, and it just kind of reworked it. So this is kind of how we're going to flow for the next little bit. Like I said, I don't know exactly how this is going to go, but I figured if I was going to record videos, maybe it made sense to just do that on a live stream, get some live feedback from chat. You ask questions, please ask questions, and maybe I can chop up this video afterwards, so into smaller bits to share. So that's kind of the idea. As we've got more people flowing into chat, that's really cool. Everyone who's joining us now, say, hey, let me know where you're tuning in from. That would be very cool for me to know. And also like what questions you have about the Claude Code system that I built, and all the things around it. So Give me one sec. Let's see here. Boo, 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 boo. Cool. So it's kind of like getting used to my kind of control center flow here, like what's open and where and all of those kinds of things, especially when, as I change windows, certain things just seem to vanish. OBS is a funny thing. Anyway, all right, let's get into this. So let's start with, actually, I'm going to copy this out so that I don't lose it. And we're just going to kind of flow with it. I'm going to say, let's do one of these at a time. I'm going to kind of use the chat to have a thing, like, I'm just going to have it tell me what to do next, which is kind of the whole point of the whole system. So I'm going to do one at a time, and I'm just going to keep coming back to this, and I'll open up in new windows and stuff like that as we go. So let's start one at a time. Why bespoke software? This is what we were talking about as the stream got started. You know, even though my background is in software development, building bespoke personal software, which is like not a good use of time, especially as a business owner. I have to think about every minute that I'm spending, and even if I can do it, am I the right person to be doing it? And I run a very small business. In all of them, it's really just me and usually one other partner and maybe a handful of contractors. But I make a lot of intentional choices about what I'm working on based on who else I'm working with, and also whether or not I want to be able to do it fully autonomously or not. So that's kind of part of my decision matrix. So, you know, building bespoke software now is not just about because I can, but why do it in the first place, I guess is the question. And the two answers for me, one comes down to, like, if I've already got workflows, I think we've lived through this time where we're so used to, you know, most of the time we buy or use a piece of software because it does a few things we really love and everything else is okay at best, right? And sometimes I'm paying quite a bit for a piece of software and I only use 5% of it, 10% of it, especially business software, my God. And so the idea of being able to have just the software I need, as well as software that I can then extend as my needs change, is a different equation than it was 6 months ago, and that's wild. The other part of it, though, is where this kind of question here alludes to about, does the system account for capacity, time management, setting realistic workloads and stuff like that, is the other part of it. And it is that I think personal software can be different and does feel different because no one understands your problem quite like you do. And it's not to say you understand it better or worse, but you understand it because you feel it very viscerally. And I think the possibility of building software that, you know, that the feedback loops of I do a thing in a certain way and it feels good or feels bad, previously I just kind of have to live with it. But now I can say that feels good. Let's make the way we did that the way we do other things. That's kind of revolutionary in a weird way. Or that feels bad. I don't even know what the other options are. Or it lets me dream up what would feel good. And that's like really been the main motivator of what's driven this entire sort of custom tool set, tool chain, and approach that I've built. The direct answer to the question here from this will probably hurt on YouTube. Does the system account for capacity and time management, setting realistic workflows? This is something that I'm working on. So I'm working on what he's referring to specifically is like the project management side of the JFDI system, which I'm going to open up right now. And show you what that looks like. So if we come in here and we go to project management. Now, here's what's interesting is this is a good example of bespoke software that was built with AI and uses AI, but not necessarily for interacting with it, right? So as I was building this out, I know people are hooking this into Linear and any manner of other project management tools, Trello, Kanban boards, Notion, and whatnot. And the truth is like I've never had a tool that really stuck for me. And I think the reason is nothing has really, if it's worked the way my brain works, it was designed for a one person, kind of like a person who works on projects. And the difference is like, I didn't need personal project management tool. I needed like multiversal project management tool. And what I mean by that is, so I'm a business owner and I work in a bunch of creative businesses, and I work on different things, but those things are often connected in terms of like the people that I'm working on them with, or there's some like other shared elements of them. So they are both individual universes unto themselves, but there's also stuff that's shared across them, and they need to stay aware of each other. And the best personal project management tools I've ever used didn't account for that, right? And so what I decided was, rather than hook into an existing project management tool and be disappointed, that I would build something that actually made sense for my brain. And this was one of the first things where I was like, oh, this is a totally different world. And so basically what I did is I applied my interview workflow, which some of you may have seen before, but let me actually open up some code here. I'm gonna open up Cursor real quick. While I do that, I'm gonna quick check tweets. I'll tell you what though, I've made this, through this journey, I should say, I've used a lot of tools, and Cursor was really like where everything started for me, which I think is true for a lot of people. And boy, has this tool fallen apart. Like, I feel like every time I load it, something is in a different place. And this is great TV, folks. Let's see if this thing actually works this time. There we go. So you may have noticed a little screen that just popped up. That is, my whole system is hosted on a Hetzner VM, because it's affordable and reliable is really the answer there. And then I use Cursor, and at some point I'm just going to ditch Cursor but go back to VS Code, because Cursor's gotten so freaking bloated. But you'll get the general idea. So I was in here to find my interview command. That's this. So I start every new project effectively the same way, and it's with this command. Yeah, demo goblins. So I start basically every new feature with something like this, and this has evolved over time, especially since I built the project management system we're about to get into. But this is a little workflow that uses the Ask User Question tool. Now, initially, it was just dialogue, and it asked me questions about things like the tech and the architecture. A big thing for me is a lot of my workflows aren't building software, and so it's also asking about the people involved and the human workflows and things like that. What are the fallbacks? And so my workflows go beyond what I'm seeing a lot of programmers do, because they also consider business, operations, other team members, needs, the communities that I work with and serve. And so it's a little more human oriented. And the truth is like, that just changes the output. It doesn't change what it's capable of. It just changes the orientation, I think, is the way I think about it. And another thing here is like, I have it ask me one question at a time, so I don't get overwhelmed with like 10 questions in a row, blah, 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 blah. And so I used a workflow like this, right? And what we did was I basically spent like an hour with it, and I said, hey, I've used every project management tool under the sun, every task management tool under the sun, every knowledge management tool under the sun. And I've had the same problem, which is they're effectively a junk drawer that I then have to go in and keep organized, which is a pain in the ass. And I don't have like time or aptitude for it. But also I have this kind of weird world where I run multiple businesses and work lots of things that need to be aware of each other. But also if I look at all of them at once, I kind of get overwhelmed, right? And that's probably a familiar feeling. So with about 45 minutes of back and forth, came up with a spec for what you're looking at here, which is based on, I've got my 30,000 foot view, which shows the spaces that I work in. So Andy, again, is like the name of my agent. It's become more of a system since I've built this, but that's where that starts. Indie Hall itself, Stacking the Bricks is my education business with Amy Hoy. 10,000 Independence is an organization that does advocacy work for solopreneurs here in Philadelphia, and then personal stuff and things like that. That's like the 30,000 foot view. And then Work Streams is this like thing that cuts across all of them that lets me see the people and things that are interconnected between them. We'll talk about that another time. Project's pretty straightforward, broken down into active focus and what is it? Active focus, on deck, growing, and on hold. And some things that are cool here is, I found myself going back and forth between projects and detail a lot, and it was annoying. And I was like, I kind of want to see what the first couple things are. And so I built this little peek view that I think is pretty cool. Just keeping an eye on chat. I see somebody mentioning dropped frames. I'm not sure. I don't see anything on OBS right now. So hopefully it's just one person. But if that is an ongoing problem, we'll have to look into what we can do to fix that. I'm going to keep going though. So projects, and then this is really what I was working up to. Because remember, the question here was about, oops. Oh, I lost my place. Let's go back here. The question was about, does this thing account for like workload and stuff like that? So the answer is kinda, and on the now view. And what the now view does is it lets me see any overdue tasks, and you can see I have a ton of stuff that's overdue from the holidays still. Overdue tasks, as well as the most important next task, if there aren't anything overdue. So when I come in here, basically for every project and universe I'm in, there is one thing to look at, unless it's overdue, in which case there's several things to look at. I would like to make that better where I don't get overwhelmed by all the past stuff. But you'll notice up here at the top, you've got these filters as quick win, deep work, people work, creative, and so on and so forth. And you also notice that on the task items, they have those, right? And so what's going on here? So in the whole interview process, I basically gave it some criteria around the kinds of things that I typically do. And so one of the things that AI does for me in the system, because again, what you're looking at here, this is just good old fashioned CRUD software. It's polished, it's nice, and it's custom, but it's just create, what is it? What is CRUD? Create, retrieve, update, delete. I guess that's right. There's no AI powering this. The one thing that AI is currently doing for me very, very well is when I create a new task, I run the task and its contents and the context that it fits inside of against Haiku and my rule set. And it does a pretty good job of assigning the correct energy type to each task. And why that's cool is that means that with no effort from me in terms of categorization, unless I notice something is particularly wrong, in which case it's just as easy as, you saw how easy I could click and change that, is if I'm ready to sit down and do some work, depending on how I feel, if I'm just getting started, I might need a quick win just to build up some momentum. Or maybe I'm already in flow and I just finished some stuff and I'm looking to stay in flow. This lets me see, what should I be working on right now? That's a quick win. What should I be working on right now? That requires deep work. What is people work? And I find that batching stuff makes sense, but the way people batch things never made sense to me, because it within one cluster of tasks that are batched, they may not require the same kind of like energy. And the way I approach work is very much an energy surfer, right? I don't love tasks being assigned to me to be done at a specific time. I spent a lot of time kind of engineering my world where like deadlines are kind of squishy most of the time. But the way I work is I try to match my work with my energy. And this tool has allowed me to match my work with my energy very, very easily. Now, the next thing that I'm working on is I do have a project management agent that is kind of running around inside of the system. And ideally, what I'm trying to get to is something where on some interval, it is not only looking at the project management system, but it also looks at my inbox. It looks at what I've completed recently. It looks at my Git history. I might go crazy and like have it start taking screenshots of my desktop to like see what I'm working on, so that it can get a sense of what I'm working on throughout the day that isn't explicitly marked down in other software. And then start the pattern we came up with is surfacing or syncing. And so there's things that I need to be doing, but if there's not a dedicated deadline to it, well, how do I decide what to do? And I kind of want to give this thing a rule set and see if it can surface things that I should be working on next, as well as sync things that may not need to be the next priority, and do that in real time based on what's happening in my inbox, what's happening on my screen, what's happening in my calendar, and all of those kinds of things. That's the next experiment on top of the energy piece. But I wanted to share the energy piece because I think it's a pretty cool answer to the question of whether or not this tracks time. It's not tracking time, but truthfully, I don't track my time. I don't bill my time. So that's not particularly useful for me. I like being aware of my time, but I'm not optimizing for time as much as I am for quality of life. And this is designed very much for that. So let's go to the next question and see how that goes. While that happens, I'm gonna check my Twitter replies and see. Got a couple of folks asking about cool, and I'm just going to boost this as well. If you're interested in my JFDI AI exec system, I'm live streaming right now at the link below. Boy, I think I misspelled that real bad. That ought to get some engagement, right? Before I dive back into the next question, I'll catch up on chat a little bit. How much it costs to keep this app going each month is a great question. So I'm currently on the $200 a month max plan. Now, you do not need a $200 max plan to use the tool every day. I'm pretty sure you could run it on the $100 a month plan if you were just using the system every day and not building the system every day the way that I have been. So not only am I running the $200 a month max plan, I actually, in the last week, exhausted it. And back in November, December, where I was in like my heaviest build periods, I was just ripping through. I was building so much stuff, not using the system, not just using the system. I was using and building the system so fast that I was hitting my weekly usage limits on a regular basis. In December, I think I spent about $2,000 in overage above the $200 plan, which is, I mean, worth every penny, but it was a pretty wild bill to like sit with for a minute, but it was definitely worth it. To avoid that scale of overage, I'd recently, this past week, I have a second Claude account, second Claude Max account. I will tell you this, the difference between Claude Pro and Claude Max, the $100 and $200, is not doubled. And I know it's like I think it's supposed to be 5x versus 20x. Again, I don't love how opaque it is, but the $200 a month plan is just an insane value in terms of, you know, one of the things that I did set up here, I'll do this in another screen, in my admin, I did build this like token usage view. It lets me get kind of a snapshot. So maybe this is a better way to answer your question. Because I felt like I was getting that bigger bill. I was like, what am I even spending this on? And so this is a little UI built on top of, there's a command line tool that is called, I think it's CC usage. Yeah, so this little CLI tool basically uses the JSON-L files, the log files from Claude Code to do some pretty powerful analysis, cost analysis. It can do things in real time. That's less useful or interesting to me, but it can also do these like it's not perfect, but pretty darn close cost estimations. And so you can see over the last week my daily usage, and in now these are not, again, this is the like token cost for Anthropic, but again, I'm on a $200 a month plan, so you can see in the last 7 days I got over $1,200 worth of tokens inside of my $200 a month plan. If you look at my last 30 days, I can only imagine what this looks like. Yeah. Like, that's insane. If I was paying API fees, I'd be paying over $7,000 in the last 30 days for tokens. The $200 a month plan is a freaking steal. I'm happy to pay for 2 of them at this point. But you can kind of see, this is pretty interesting. So like, one of the funny things is like Christmas Eve, we were traveling, for the holidays, and actually Christmas Eve ended up being like one of my biggest build days ever. I was building out some just massive stuff. So I've got my usage by model. As you can see, this is heavy on the Opus. The fact that it's even $200 on Haiku is pretty funny to me, because I use Haiku all day, every day, for tons of under the hood, like analysis, synthesis, and things like that. It keeps track of things that could consume tokens. So I do a lot of include, like progressive file include stuff, and so it helps me see what is being referenced the most often, so I can look for things to optimize there, as well as top tools. And then my most expensive sessions. Again, nothing particularly surprising in here, and I don't remember what's in all of these, especially if I didn't give it a friendly name, so I'm not going to click into them, because I don't want to possibly like leak anything. But that is a way for me to see and keep tabs on. But generally speaking, I think if somebody, once I'm done building, because I'm not sure if that'll ever be the case, but like standard day-to-day usage, I'm 100% confident can happen inside of a $200 a month plan. It might be even possible inside of a $100 a month Claude Code plan. I don't know what actual, I do know what actual token usage looks like, but right now I don't have an easy way to separate like day-to-day usage from new feature building, if that makes sense. But that's a great question from Jarb. Tuning in from Bath, UK. That's really cool. Anybody else who's tuned in recently, I'd love to know where you're joining us from. Was this Damidina Subdued? Back to you. Can you run a model from Hugging Face 2? It's a great question. My understanding is that the answer is yes. I haven't done it yet. This is one of those like experiments that I want to do sometime, probably in the next few weeks or later this month. I've seen a bunch of projects that kind of let you proxy Claude Code through another model. So there's no reason to believe why that couldn't happen. I just haven't done any experimentation with like, how does performance and quality change when you switch models. And because I use this tool every day, and I'm focused on making this tool work really well for me, and I can afford the $200 a month plan, this is like a later stage optimization. For me, the local model piece is less about money and more about not being reliant on the model providers, right? And them changing stuff, which is obviously already happening and can happen at any time. As well as like, I don't love sending them all of my stuff all day long, all my data all day long. So like I said, for me, it's less of a cost cutting thing, because $200 a month in the grand scheme of the businesses that I run is a rounding error. But from a privacy, security, and durability perspective, it's a destination that I want to be in. And I think back to, I want to talk a little bit in this stream about like ethics and values of these tools as well. Speaking personally, I think every giant tech company is problematic in one way or another. So you got to choose on a spectrum, right? I'm personally like pretty against using OpenAI. I find OpenAI and Sam Altman a pretty scary combo personally, based on all the research that I've done, and not that Anthropic is perfect either. And they've made decisions that I don't like, but I don't consider Dario a scary dude. I consider Sam Altman a scary dude with power in his hands. So That's my own decision. I don't project, like, you decide for you. I think it's important people are, I don't want to say I don't care what decision you make. I do care what decision you make, but it's more important to me that you make a decision that's informed than just accept these tools for what they are, right? I think in the same way that we've got sort of a lot of folks that are kind of like blindly rejecting these tools, we've got people that are blindly accepting these tools. I think both ends of that spectrum are not good, and the best version is going to be somewhere in the middle. I'll answer a couple more chat questions before I get back into my planned questions here, because these are good. Tuning in from Toronto. I love Toronto, by the way. For those of you who don't know, I'm in Philadelphia, but Toronto is a city that I love. I got a lot of friends there. I've had a really good time there every time I've been. Honestly, Toronto reminds me a little bit of Philadelphia, but I'm also a former snowboarder, so I see more Canadians here, and your mountains are better than our mountains. I will give you that 100%. Some folks from UK. Is that John Hilton that I can see from the avatar? I can't quite tell. It's a little small. But if that's you, John, I hope so. It's good to see you. More Canada. Haven't fine-tuned, but some Quen models are surprisingly good. Yeah, I mean, again, I haven't really spent any time playing with non-anthropic models. But I have spent most of the last year seeing the evolution of them, and I'm in the firm belief of, like, whatever the frontier model, like an Opus is, that in 6 months we're gonna have, local models that are just as good, if not better. The speed at which they're catching up is incredible to me. And so my hope is that I can run this with local models, or even a combination of local and frontier models that are hosted. I'm cool with that at some point. Awesome, John. I'm so glad you're here. This is really cool. John, if you decide that you want to, like, grab the YouTube link and share this in the 30 by 500 Discord, Slack, whatever it is, that would be cool with me. Totally up to you, though. Just if you wouldn't mind doing it, keep me on track. So, good questions. I'm going to come back to where we left off. So, the next questions are in the personal assistant layer. I had a question from a few folks asking about where the assistant is hosted. Is it fully custom made running Opus? I just answered some of those questions already. For those of you who are just tuning in, when I started I was running everything local on the same Mac Mini that I'm streaming from now, and then I would push everything up to GitHub, and then I'd grab my laptop and I'd go to work and I'd pull everything down, and then I'd push everything up and all of that back and forth. And then and I've seen a ton of people do this too, I was using Termius, which is a pretty awesome, like, Mac terminal app that works both on desktop and on iPhone. And so I was SSHing into my server and doing stuff there. But that, like, crazy scroll glitch in Claude Code, that was really the big thing that pushed me into building this custom tool. Was I was using it so much that glitch was literally getting in the way and breaking things for me. And so I was like, how do I make it so I can do this from my phone as well as multiple devices without worrying about things getting out of sync? And the answer was, rather than SSHing into my Mac Mini from my phone, I would put everything on a hosted server that I could lock down. And that server is running, like I said, I've run mine on Hetzner, but I use DigitalOcean as well for other things. It could be anywhere. It's just a standard vanilla Linux box. And then I install Tailscale on that Linux box. That Linux box Tailscale lets me access that Linux box from any other device in my tailnet. If you're not familiar with Tailscale, it is one of the coolest pieces of software that has nothing to do with AI. But it basically is this tiny little client you can install on almost any computer, and many, many devices that just have a really basic Linux computer inside of them. So it can run on a Raspberry Pi, it can run on a Apple TV, and the free version of it is incredibly powerful. Basically, the way I have it is I install it on all my devices that I want to be able to access from all my other devices, and it creates a private local network between them. They're all inaccessible from the outside world, but once the device is authenticated, I can SSH into that from anywhere, or not even just SSH, like, it behaves like it's on a local network. And the setup is so easy to the degree that the first time I set it up, I spent 30 minutes trying to figure out what I had to do next, and the answer was, it's done. it was already working the whole time, which was just wild. So Tailscale connects all my devices, and so from my phone, from my laptop, from my Mac Mini at home, from anywhere, that if I authenticate that device, and now because I've taught my assistant to connect to a bunch of our like technical systems at the Indie Hall Clubhouse, so like it's installed on our router. Yesterday we had a huge turnout at Indie Hall, and some heavy downloaders and uploaders were like hammering a couple of our access points, and it was a weird traffic profile that I'd never seen before. Had a really hard time figuring out what the problem was, and so I ended up firing up my assistant and say, hey, go SSH into the router, go look at the logs and tell me what's going on. And not only did it tell me what's going on, it told me how to fix it, which was, again, that in the past has eaten up tons of time. And once I did that, I was like, all right, cool. Now write a script that does that automatically every 5 minutes so it can be proactive. And so a combination of Tailscale means it can connect to the device. SSH means it can go read all the logs I give it permission to. And then it can write scripts to programmatically detect problems and possibly even fix them, is a real thing that I've done in the last 24 hours. Pretty amazing. And yes, it is almost all Opus, as we've discussed. Why headless Claude Code over Agent SDK is one of the biggest questions that I get. The short answer is I didn't want to mess around with an SDK, right? I actually think I started this right before the SDK dropped. Might be the most honest answer. So when I started using this, I was like, how can I connect to my Claude Code? I started looking for APIs. Yeah, there was no SDK when I started. That's true. The SDK hadn't even dropped yet. And I went reading through the docs and I saw that there was a headless mode of Claude. And basically, if you're not familiar with how that works, is it lets you run the Claude command on a command line with all of your flags as well as whatever your initial prompt is. And then it runs non-interactively. So this only works with things that don't require additional feedback, but then it spits out the result as structured JSON. And so I was like, well, why don't I just build a little thing that, when I type into a box, it sends that thing to the command line, runs it, and then catches the JSON and then presents the formatted JSON nicely back in the browser. And that was the very first version of what you see. And honestly, is the vast majority of how this still works. I've since upgraded that, from some kind of hacky JavaScript posting and then SSE events. It's now all running on WebSockets, so it's more stable and bidirectional and things like that. But the Claude Code part of it that hasn't changed at all, and it's not even really a harness around Claude Code, which is in itself a harness. So harness is all the way down. It's really just a very, very simple layer of control over what goes in and how to handle the different JSON structures that come out on the other side. But the really cool part and how that you're like, well, yeah, but that's for one request. What about the rest? So when you send the first request, when it gets the response, it also passes out the session ID. And so if I send the session ID back to my client with the response that I'm presenting, that means that the next time I send a message, I can send the session ID along with my second message, and it resumes the Claude session. And so here's the best part about all of this, this is a total accident. This is not an architectural genius moment by any stretch, but I realized the power of it. That means that the Claude Code app that most people are running, 2, 5, 8 of at a time, you see people with all of these HUDs up on their screen. Every instance of Claude Code that is running on their computer, on a computer somewhere, is using processing power and RAM. And it's using RAM even if it's not actively doing anything, right? And so if you're running 8 Claude Code instances at 2 gigs of RAM a piece, you need a 16 gigs of RAM, and that's before you have any kind of other operational overhead, right? Well, when you use headless, and that would be true with the SDK as well, I believe. I'm not actually 100% sure of that. If somebody knows differently in the chat, you can correct me. But my understanding is that it's similar to Claude Code. It's a daemon. I guess if it's compiled down, whatever, it's running all the time and therefore consuming the memory the entire time that's running. My version, whenever it is not actively processing a request, that Claude Code instance doesn't exist, right? It goes to sleep. And it doesn't like the instance goes to sleep, like the instance is gone. And then it gets resumed the next time I send a request. And so the amount of Claude processing power I can do on a much smaller server is a real benefit, even if it's not a benefit that I was specifically optimizing for when I started building this system. So that's a pretty cool thing that I think most people don't realize, and is one of the many reasons why I'm very happy not using the Agent SDK. Now, I have looked at the Agent SDK, and I consider it part of like the exit strategy to a degree, in the same way that I said, I would be totally game to swap out any of Anthropic models for another model, a local model, a cheaper model, an open model, whatever it is. I feel kind of the same way about the Claude Code app itself. I don't love that it's closed source, but it doesn't bother me either, because I've been able to extend it in the way that I've extended it. Now, if it seemed, I don't know, if it were the kind of thing where one day Claude went, Anthropic went really off the rails and made it so I couldn't use Claude Code the way that I am, the SDK is obviously the way that I would go. So maybe I'll do it in advance. I don't know. It's one of those things where, again, I'm not building this because I like building software. I'm building this to solve real problems for me every day. And every minute I spend hacking on the SDK to build something from scratch that Claude Code can already do is time that I could spend building something that's useful, or actually working on my business, or more specifically, building tools so that I'm spending less time working and more time doing the shit that I actually want to do in my life. So like, I get why people are like, why not SDK? It's so much more power. And I'm like, but I don't need it. And I'm not in this to build the tool. I'm in this for the tool to solve my problems. And I have not run into roadblocks with Claude Code that the Claude Code SDK would let me solve. As far as I can tell, the only time that will be the case is one where they somehow kneecap the way that I'm currently using Claude Code. They take away headless mode is like the main thing that I could think of. Or if I wanted like more detail profiling, maybe I start using the SDK for like very specific purpose agents at some point. But again, like I approach this from like every tool solves a problem. If the tool I'm using doesn't have a problem, I'm not going to go seek a new tool just because. That's shiny object syndrome, and that's why I build more stuff than you, I guess. And I think that covers this round of questions. Oh, there are some sub questions here. How I use these things. So hosting and infrastructure, we run on a cheap VPS, Mac Mini, and Tailscale. We talked about that. We talked about Claude Code over SDK. I just like that Claude Code is like so heavily battle tested, better than any SDK custom agent I could build. And I get all the benefits of the new features they add to Claude Code. They just show up in my system automatically, but they don't take away anything in my system as well. So that's like the best of both worlds. I do heavily use skills and agents and the classic /command approach as well. Background tasks and scheduled jobs is really one of the big things that I think I do more of than most other people, where every day you run, you wake up and you manually run a command, or you click a button. Because I'm doing Claude Code headless, that also means that I've been able to schedule lots of things. And let's take a look at how that actually works. So you could do this with effectively any, let's see here, schedule jobs reference. So you could do this with a standard, any cron. You could do it with basic Linux cron. You could do your favorite sort of cron replacement, whatever it is. I didn't have a preference. I hadn't interviewed me. We ended up picking this open source project called Bree, B-R-E-E. That is my job runner. And so Bree runs and handles all of my recurring jobs and tasks. And so, this is a reference that I have for me, and the system has created for itself, of all the jobs that run. And these run like all day, every day, basically. And the vast majority of these, all they really do, so like let's go with a concrete example here. So I'm going to do my relationship refresh script. So this is what a Brie job file looks like, and it's just JavaScript. And again, I haven't written any of these. These are all templated out. There is now a somewhere in here there's an actual like all new jobs follow a template, so the assistant can create new jobs the way that I want them to, and they all work consistently. But what this one is basically doing is a lot of what you see in here is besides the actual running, it is a validation to make sure that it A, ran, B, it ran all the steps that it said it was supposed to, and C, that the JSON that it spits out the other side can be handled the correct way. When we're doing that, basically one of the things that I'll do is whatever the workflow is in the we've kind of given the model, given the agent. One of the workflows that works really, really well is if you give it success criteria and say, at the end, it should look like this. And you present that at the beginning and at the end, right? So at the beginning, I'll say, hey, the goal of this workflow is to populate a JSON structure that looks like this. With this information, you're going to follow these steps, and at the end, you're going to spit out JSON that looks like this, but is filled with the correct details. And then it goes through however many steps it has to go through, and at the end, it spits out that JSON. It can still make mistakes as an LLM, and that's why validation scripts are so important. And so all of my jobs have validation built in. This one is making sure that the number of tools that were called is correct, making sure that it's following the to-do right system, so on and so forth. But the actual important part, let me see if I can find it, is yeah, so here, I mean, it's this function right here. It's running Claude CLI with stream JSON output for validation. So the prompt is, now I prefix it with as Andy internal task. That is just so that I can easily hide these automated jobs in my, I have like a session picker system, and I can hide or enable noisy tasks. Noisy tasks are these things that run every 5 minutes, 15 minutes, once a day, whatever it is. There's certain things that I want to show up in there. There's certain things that I don't, but that little flag helps me hide those. And then, here's, this should look familiar, run/relationship refresh, which is just a slash command. This is a scheduled job running at time. Critically, you must output JSON relate. So like, that's the whole prompt. That's literally all that gets passed into Claude Code Headless, because the slash command is what has all of the real mechanics of the system. And that also means that I can manually run the same slash command that the automatic job runs, and we get identical results, which makes both debugging as well as just manual runs of these things that much easier. I don't have to maintain it in two places, right? So that's the whole command. It's going to send that in, and it's going to, it's going to run, it's going to do its thing, and spit it back out. And then depending on what job it is, sometimes that will daisy chain to another job. Sometimes that will simply post into a Discord the update. Sometimes it will be silent if things went well, but make some information if there is some intervention needed from me. Each job is a little bit different, but those are the ways that I handle my scheduled jobs at a high level. I feel like I could probably spend an hour or two just on how I've architected the job system, and happy to answer specific questions about it if you have it before we move on. While I'm doing that, I'll jump into the chat for just a second and answer this question from Mike. If I recall correctly, you're using Redis. Is there any other database types service you're using? I'm not using Redis. I'm using Postgres for everything. This is self-hosted Supabase. Supabase is great, although I will also say I'm using basically none of Supabase's features. It was just like I wanted a nice wrapper on Postgres, and it was ready and easy. At some point, I might drop Supabase just for good old-fashioned Postgres. In fact, some other newer things that I've built that are standalone is just running Postgres in its own container. So it's just Postgres, which like to date, I've learned a lot about Postgres over the last year. from an Indie Hall member named Chris Alfano, and like it took a little bit of him reminding me, but I've come to believe is true. Is like at this point, Postgres is kind of almost like its own operating system in the fact that not only is it a database, but you can use it for queuing and job management and stuff like that. And it is so good and so fast. And to have one fewer dependency from me and again, I'm not trying to build a complex system. I'm trying to build a stable system. That has worked really well for me. If there's a reason that's going to bite me in the ass, I'm interested to hear it, and I can make a decision based on then. But no, everything is in Postgres. Occasionally, I will prototype things data-wise in simpler things. So, like, for example, right before we got back from the new year, I wanted to rearrange my wine rack. This is a cool one. So let's come in here and look at my wine rack system. Let's go. I'm going to be honest, I'm not 100% sure if what I just typed is going to work. We're going to find out together. While that's doing its thing, I'll tell you what I did though. So I wanted to rearrange my wine rack. It's kind of a mess. It's confusing. And I had great wine on it, but I never knew where anything was because I just kind of put stuff in at random. And I wanted it to be easy to grab a thing when I was looking for something in particular. And so I took all the bottles off the rack. I took a picture of the front label of every one, and then a few images at a time, I would load those into the system, and I would say, hey, go research each bottle of wine, stick it in a database, and then we'll go from there. And so I'm so glad this worked. So while this is spitting everything out, this is freaking wild. So you may have noticed that the first thing it did is it looked up my wine cellar database, and it's SQLite. So could I have said, hey, go create a new table in the Andy core system? So that is the main app, which is a Laravel app with Postgres. That's it. But I was like, I don't know if this is even going to live in there forever, so let me make a standalone thing. So it's just a folder that's got a SQLite database in it that it started loading stuff into. Put all the images up in my DigitalOcean storage bucket. And over the course of, honestly, it took more time for me to take the pictures than it did to do anything else, which is crazy. But I went through, I took the pictures, and it would go research the bottle, bring back the information, I would verify it, I'd say yes, add it, and it would put all that information in the database. So, you're not even seeing a fraction of what is actually in here. So like, for instance, if I were to go to this, let's do this Cap Franc. Let's see. What other information do we have about that didn't work. What other information do we have about? Oh, no. Live demos. Oh, that's right. I forgot that on this computer I have it auto-submitting. I'll turn that off. Let's see. This is another one of those tooling things. I know that there are great tools out there for speech. I just haven't played with something new probably in about a month. I think I paid $20 one time for this Paraspeech tool, and it works very nicely for me. So if there's something that you really like for voice to text, that's Mac or iOS, I'm interested. But you can see this is all the information that it stored completely automatically from a single message label. I'm going to come back to your question about RAG and semantic in just a second, Mike. It's a very good one. So every bottle got stored with really good metadata that was properly researched and then verified. But then I was like, all right, so you know what all the wine is. I have a 60 bottle wine rack and 51 bottles. what's a rack strategy that would actually put bottles that are like each other near each other, so that when I'm going to grab a bottle for a meal or for a pairing, or because I have a certain craving, I can know where it is without even looking up. I can know roughly where it is. And in like 30 seconds, it came up with like a really good rack strategy with almost no free space in the rack, which is a very hard thing to do for a human, I would say. So I did that, and then I said, okay, help me put them back in. And so I said, I said, you know what order I gave you the bottles. Let's do the same order again. But for each of the 4 bottles, I want you to show me an ASCII diagram of the wine rack and tell me which slot to put it in. So watch what happens on my screen when I go, show me the wine rack. And I think this will work too. Basically what it did is it drew the wine rack and then put a number in the slot and then had a little key where the number described what bottle was supposed to go in that slot. And fingers crossed. So it knows the slots. I would say like draw this as an ASCII diagram. Right. So like that view is not super helpful for visualizing where something is on the rack, but what it's about to do is. And one of the things I'm thinking about is I might take a picture of it and be like, especially as I start pulling things out or refilling, I could take a picture of the rack and I can say, hey, cross-reference this to your knowledge of the rack and tell me what I should buy to replace it. That's pretty cool, right? So you can see what it's doing right now. It's spitting out a little ASCII graph of what's in it, how it organized it. So the top row is my sparkling wine, then it was fortified in a couple of overflow slots: Burgundy and Chablis, Chardonnay, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc and light whites, Pinot Noir, mixed reds, Cab and Bordeaux blends, and then full-bodied reds. It's not complicated. It's not fancy. But I didn't have to figure it out on my own, and that felt like a magic trick. So this is like a really cool application of using Claude Code for something that has nothing to do with code, but a real simple SQLite database is very, very powerful. Now, the question you have, Mike, about RAG and semantic search, not in this particular part of the tool, but I have RAG and semantic search heavily, heavily built into the memory system of the JFDI system, which I tried out a bunch of memory tools back in early December or so, and some were good, some did not work at all. I think at the time Claude Mem was the best of them, but it was super, super optimized for programmer workflows. And I kept finding that it was not working nearly as well when I was doing things outside of coding. And so I was like, well, I can modify this, or I can learn from it and see what I can build for myself. And so I did the latter. And I can show you a little bit about it, but I think one of the easiest spots I can show you right up here, you'll notice this semantic search pops up. So let's see, what's the easiest way? And I have a longer video about the memory system on YouTube you can go check out. The short version is this. Part 1 is, yeah, Mike, my assistant is a sommelier. And actually, my best friend is a sommelier, and I'm a partner in a wine business, which is part of why I have this collection of wine that I have, besides enjoying wine. I don't think Eric needs to fear for his job in terms of what this is doing, but I'm very excited to show him how these tools work so that he can use them in his job. Part of, I think, what stresses him out a lot is the amount of stuff he keeps in his head is truly impossible, I think, long term. And it's where a lot of his struggle comes from. And if I can get him to start sharing the load with a tool like this, it will help him be better at the things that he is uniquely better at. Versus spending all of his cycles on everything. So real quick about how I'm using RAG and semantic search in the system. So part 1 is I have a job that every 5 minutes grabs the Claude session files that are on disk, and it sticks them in Postgres, sticks it in a row of all of our sessions. And it's not only sticking the full transcript file in there, which some might say that's a dumb thing to do. Maybe it is. I don't know. Hasn't created problems for me yet. Excuse me. So every session gets added as well as updated, and it's happening in like not real time, but like I said, every 5 minutes. This database is up to date 5 minutes at a time. You can see the session we were just working on is already in the database, but it doesn't just stick the session there. It does some pre-processing. So it is looking at the transcript, and it also pulls out useful metadata, like how many messages are in here, how many tool calls, how many files, what files got touched, what tools got used, and then again, I have the full transcript. And this is all being saved in the database. At minimum, this is useful as just like a backup of what I've done, right? And it allows me to clear session files on disk much quicker. I clear like, I think anything past the last 3 days. And truthfully, it could probably really be more like the last 24 hours at some point, just to keep Claude Code speedy on load. But once that was in there, and it's also, again, it's searchable. Once that's in there, then I was able to build what I call memory lane. And the way memory lane works, this is where the vector stuff comes in. So there is a, I should say, if we go back to the Claude sessions, I do have embeddings being generated for all sessions. The trouble is like sessions get real long and embeddings aren't very useful for very long sessions, I've learned. So you kind of need to, chunk things up. That's the best practice, right? So Department of Personal Efficiency, yes, I'm reading chat. I will be back in here in a few minutes. So every 5 minutes, sessions get synced to the main database, and then every 15 minutes, another job comes along. It looks at new sessions or things that have been added to the session since the last job. And I have a chunking algorithm, and it generates it chunks it and then generates an embedding on the chunk. And here's how that works. So the session, I throw the session against a mix of sonnet and haiku, depending on a handful of factors. And the model basically does the chunking for me. The model is reading the transcript and it's looking for these specific things. It's looking for decisions, it's looking for insights, it's looking for patterns, it's looking for commitments, it's looking for lessons learned, corrections, workflows, and gaps. And a handful of other little things in here that get used a whole lot less often. Now, all it's doing, it's looking at the long transcript and finding a little section of the transcript that matches one of those categories, and it pulls it out and saves it to a new record in a new table of the database that is linked to the transcript. So we have data integrity all the way through. Now, here's an interesting one. It noticed, we're talking about Dr. Frank, it noticed I have a couple of bottles, and it goes, hey, there's a pattern here, right? That's actually a pretty good example of it working in a non-technical setting where it goes, hey, I noticed this, that might be useful information for later. And so a memory is like, what is the difference between a memory and a thought is maybe an interesting question that led me in this. And kind of the lightning bolt. Boy, am I mixing my metaphors here. The light bulb moment was actually inspired by a paper that somebody who came to one of the meetups at Indy Hall shared with me. Google was doing some research in one of their labs and realized that the element of surprise actually started creating memory-like behavior at the model level, like deep inside the models that they're training at Google. And I was like, well, I'm not interested in training models, but that's an interesting insight. And if think about why is that? Well, think about your own behavior. You are more likely to remember something if there was an element of surprise. And surprise isn't explicitly good or bad. It's just a deviation from expectations, right? And that's why disappointment memories tend to hit so hard, is they're a deviation from expectations. And so what haiku and sonnet are basically doing is looking at a transcript and looking for deviations from expectations, among other things, to extract out potential memories, and then it runs it through a ranking algorithm and things like that. But what it's effectively doing, again in this example, creating a memory that says Alex buys multiple bottles of producers he likes, accurate, identifies the pattern. It says when the memory was formed and when the memory was saved. Memory is formed, that is the timestamp from the original transcript. The memory saved is the time that this new entity in the new database is stored, right? There's a longer description of what it thinks the memory is, the reasoning that it made that decision, right? And we store that as well. A confidence score, related entities that it helps it search through the both the database and the text parts of the system, as well as the original context, which in some cases is a single line. It's usually like at maximum, it's usually between like 1 and 10 lines of transcript. So if it's part of a back and forth between me and the model, or the model having a few messages in a row, that all gets stored as the original context. You with me so far? So that is what is generating memories. Now there's a great question in here that says, how does it know what's a good and bad memory or a useful memory? Out of the gate, it doesn't. And as you can see that like over the last, when did I build this? I built this in like mid-December or so. So like in less than a month, it's generated over 4,500 memories. And if you scroll through here, there's a lot of very interesting things in here. Not all of them are good or bad or useful or unuseful, right? So this is just sort of like prepping the database. Now, to dial all this back, not only is it generating this, but we also generate embeddings. We're generating embeddings for the metadata specifically, and then we also generate an embedding for the original context. And both of those get stored in the database as well. So where that becomes useful is in chat. If we come back to the, what was it? We were looking at the Dr. Frank. We're looking at the wine session. Oh, here we go. So you notice up here this little purple bubble. And you may notice through the rest of the demo that purple bubble shows up when I chat sometimes. That is the other half of memory lane. Now, the way that part works is I have a hook in Claude Code that whenever I send a message and whenever the agent finishes a series of messages and a couple of other conditions, it uses my message or its messages as effectively the query to hit the memories database and surface potentially related memories above a certain threshold and within a certain context. This is probably one of the most sophisticated parts of the system that I've built, and it's taken quite a bit of tuning, but it's working very, very well, as you can kind of see on here. Now, what's interesting is you know, this view may not stay in my app forever, but in a lot of ways, it kind of gives me almost a debug view of not only what's getting pulled into the memories, but why. You can see, just in the little bit of back and forth we had with the wine here, it pulled in these two corrections that, if I'm going to be totally honest, aren't exactly relevant here. Not irrelevant, but you know, I think a correction is a good thing for it to know. It pulls it and it injects it into context. So if I didn't have this UI here, it would inject it sort of silently, right? But it now becomes part of the context that the model is working with. So this is the thing that makes it so that I don't have to remind it of things all of the time, or it's one of the main things. It also means that I can periodically do things like I have a skill that lets it search the memories. So if I just say use memories as part of a prompt, it will go database, both plain text and vector. I also have a version of that that's like just straight searching the sessions in case it's not turning up in memories, which, you know, does happen sometimes, but the system's pretty good at generating memories for most things. So I can both manually invoke it as well as this automated injection system that I call memory lane. That is all being powered by vector. And then how does it know what's good or bad? There's two parts to that answer. One is there is this threshold. This is the part that I'm like finding the hardest to tune, because you want to set a floor of basically if a memory is pulled and its semantic match is below a certain threshold, it's not going to get injected. It's going to get thrown away. If it's above a certain threshold, it gets injected. But the thresholds seem to need to be tuned to the context of the conversation. And so I'm still, you'll see there's this little bug icon here. I actually have it build me a like retrieval diagnostics view. It's like not cached at all, so it's slow as shit. But it lets me look at the search query. It kind of lets me see how it deconstructed it, what queries passed, what did not. And this kind of lets me see what it is keeping and what it is throwing away, and I can start getting a sense of why. And then the other tool that I have is these thumbs up, thumbs down, is that lets me say, oh, you picked a good one, and it will give it a positive additional weighting next time that memory shows up in that context. And then the same thing with the thumbs down. It gives it a negative weight, so it'll pull it potentially below that threshold. So sometimes it takes like one or two extra thumbs up or thumbs down on a memory to get it into the right band. But again, like, it's amazing how well it works without much more fiddling with it. And I find myself maybe like once a week or so right now going in and really doing maybe like a 30-minute tuning session on a few things here. It's like one of my favorite parts of what I've built here. Let me get into some questions before we continue. But Mike, I hope that answers your questions about RAG and semantic search pretty thoroughly. You self-hosted with Base as well. Sometimes use Convex because of the native TypeScript integration. I've been seeing about Convex. I don't actually really know what it is. It seems like it's a like applicate like a backend as a service type thing. And I'm doing stuff in TypeScript, and I like TypeScript. Actually learned a lot about these systems from Matt Pocock, who's like the TypeScript guy on Twitter and YouTube. And Matt's actually a client of mine. We help him with his products and his launches and his courses and stuff like that. If I'm meeting with Matt on Monday. I haven't, and like that's Matt's been kind of like my portal into both TypeScript and a lot of agentic stuff. But I don't know a lot about Convex, but I see people really liking it, and I'm curious what folks like about it. Department of Personal Efficiency asked, are you open to having a 15-minute career chat consultant type call? Would love to see if you'd want to collaborate with my startup. My time is pretty limited for one-on-one calls, but if you want to send me an email, my email address is alex@indyhall.org. And I need you to be clear about what it is that you would like to talk about or ask questions about. If it's a good fit, I might be able to make time for a call, but it's more common that I'll want to do something asynchronously over email until or unless there's some kind of actual engagement. But otherwise, happy to hear what it is that you're looking for. Email is the only channel that I receive those kind of requests through. So that is the way to do that. Alex@indyhall, that's INDYHALL.org. Great big tree hugger, hello from Vancouver. That's another city that I love. I'm loving all the Canadian representation in the chat today. That's cool. And Vancouver, I haven't been in Vancouver in a long time, but I enjoyed myself thoroughly. I love the Pacific Northwest in general. I have a lot of friends out that way, so great part of the world. How does the Claude Code headless sessions are distributed between the VPS and the Mac Mini for their executions? So that's a very good question. At this point, they aren't. I do basically all of my work on the VPS session. The VPS session has SSH access to my Mac Mini, my MacBook Pro, and all my other devices. And so if I need to use Claude on one of my other devices, I'm almost always, this is crazy, I'm almost always using it through my main assistant because my assistant has all this other tooling around it. Now, if I don't need that other tooling, I will run a Claude Code session locally on my Mac or whatever. And sometimes that is necessary, sometimes that is useful, but it's generally not in a situation where I care about that session being in my permanent record. In theory, if I cared enough, I could write a little script that syncs them up to the VPS, and that way they would get stuffed into the database as well. But again, it's like, I feel like it happens maybe once or twice a week right now. I'm really doing everything directly through my main agent. And the fact that my main agent can talk to these other computers, even if they're completely different operating systems, unlocks a lot of power. Department of Personal Efficiency, you had Spark file in the sidebar at one point. What was that? Sparkle queries? No, Spark file. I'm not going to open the Spark file because it's very personal, but the Spark file is an idea that I've been doing for maybe almost 20 years. One of my favorite books is a book called Where Good Ideas Come from a guy named, I'll tell you what, I really like Dia as a browser. I do not like when it does that. Oh, for crying out loud. Dia. Let's just do this. Oh, you get to see what my Amazon history is. That's personal too. Where Good Ideas Come From by Stephen Johnson is the name of the book. This book is fantastic. It is an anthropological look at the history of innovation. So it is looking at periods of creativity and renaissance throughout human history, throughout recorded human history, and that identifies a common theme between them, which is that there were places for people to gather and converse and share half-baked ideas. And in the book, Stephen Johnson creates this concept of what he calls a slow hunch, or a half-baked idea, which is there's a there, and I'm approaching it kind of slowly, figuring it out. And periods of explosive innovation occur. Have these slow hunches bump into each other in common spaces. In, periods of Renaissance, that includes like, the cafes of London and Paris, that we're talking about the salons of the Greeks. We're talking about co-working spaces, like the one that I've been running for the last 20 years. And honestly, to a degree, shared spaces like Twitter and the YouTube chat, I would put into this as well, where people show up with half-baked ideas and occasionally they smush together into a fully baked idea. And that's where good ideas come from, is disconnected half-baked ideas, and sometimes a bad idea sprinkled in there as well. So how does this tie into a Spark file? Well, one of the ideas that Stephen talks about is the idea of creating a Spark file, which is the place where I just put all the little idea fragments that keep popping into my head. And so, where we started today's stream, for those of us with ADHD and things like it, our brains are always on, very active. And if you don't have somewhere to put those ideas, it becomes kind of deafening, right? And so for me, the Spark file is a place to put the idea so that it's no longer bouncing around inside my head anymore. But it puts it in a place where I know I'm going to see it later, because the second part of the Spark file is a review process. And the way I started doing this is I would put everything in one long-running text file, and then once a month I would reread everything that I had written down. I'd look for patterns. I'd look for unobvious, like things that were not obviously connected when I wrote them down, but upon review are connected. I look for, I keep coming back to the same idea. I think I have to do something with that idea. So it's all about, it's kind of a version of journaling, right? But it's a little less structured. It is more, it's like journaling for ADHD people, I suppose. The tricky part is like, so I do that monthly, and then I would do a once a year review. And as you can imagine, I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Those documents are impossibly long to follow. And I can't, you think about like, what happens when your AI chat has too much in its context? It gets drunk and stupid. I can't hold all that in my head to actually notice useful patterns anymore. And so I don't want to say I've stopped doing it, but the outcomes have gotten harder without me kind of throwing away really old stuff. And obviously I could kind of, now that I know how compacting works, I could do a compact style effort on it and say like, all right, here's the month, let's compact it down to the good stuff and carry that forward to the next session. But I never thought to do that until literally just now. But what I have done is I've moved my Spark file notes into this system, and I now have quick entry. So instead of it going into a text file, it goes into my Spark file database. And now I'm doing all of my entry and my reflection with the help of my assistant. It goes through and helps me notice those patterns. So the workflow hasn't changed, but the amount of effort to get the same quality output has shifted. And I was like putting more energy into turning things into action than the like heavy lift of the gathering in order to reflect. It can do the gathering, I can do the reflection. And that's how a lot of this works for me, is I use the tool to do the sort of mise en place, the pre-work, the pre-organizing that makes it easier to do the work. I get it to do the prep work so that I can do the real work, right? That's what has really made the system so powerful for me. So that's what the Spark file is about, and how I use it. At some point, maybe I'll figure out a way to show a version of it that does not expose the complete inner workings of my brain. I'm not fully comfortable with that, but we'll see. Back to Mike's question, cool pattern analysis, experimenting with that in code development. Memory is definitely harder to lift, lots of potential noise there. Yeah, I mean, I'll say, back to the memory system, figuring out signal to noise inside of it, it feels like, I mean, there's people that are smarter than me and with way more experience. Like and that's one of the areas where like I feel like there's a bit like vector searches, it feels like a bit of a magic trick to me. And if there's people who like have great resources on vector search and embeddings and things like that, I now understand roughly how they work, but I don't feel like I have a strong enough grasp on them to really wield them. I feel like they're kind of a lightsaber that if you don't know what you're doing, you can do either a lot or nothing. And I can't really tell how, like, it's working, but I can't tell how well it's working compared to how well it could be working. And I'm not really sure how to cross that gap yet. And so if folks have ideas or suggestions, I'd love you to drop those in the chat. That would be super helpful for me, for sure. Department of Personal Efficiency, you're very welcome. Great big tree hugger. Thanks for all the work. Inspired you to implement entities and memories. I'm so glad to hear that. Like, that's the reason I've been sharing this stuff, is not like I'm not interested in, like, I don't think this is exactly a SaaS. I see some folks asking about sharing this. I'm in the mode where like I'm more deep in learning this stuff than I have been in any new technology in a very, very, very long time. And I'm having a fun time. And I really like sharing this so with the hopes that other people will be inspired to try themselves. And I think there is, to use the lightsaber analogy I just did, there's an element of, I think there's more value in building your own lightsaber than borrowing one or building one off the shelf. And the things that I've learned and the understanding I have of the system, I think are mechanically valuable to actually using the system. And I think the exact same system in the hands of somebody else is going to be worse for two reasons. One is how deeply personally grafted into my life and brain the system is. Now, I could pull all the personal stuff out and start grafting your stuff in. I think that's a doable thing. The thing that is not replaceable, I think, is the stuff I've learned while building this. And I think it could be useful for somebody without that learning, but I think it would be a fraction of as useful as it is for me. So I'm hesitant. I'm thinking about how I want to do this. And to jump ahead to the question, am I going to make it a public SaaS or personal? I've been kind of clear from the front that like I'm making software for me first, and the fact that other people are interested in it is exciting to me, but it's not really the goal. I think the version that is most likely to happen is something where I want to try something like, 10 people can apply to be a part of a group of like 10 people or so, 10 business owners. And I think this is another thing, is like, I think there's criteria of who I can work best with, at least initially. I think 10 business owners who have a business that is not brand new, is well established to some degree, is just themselves. Maybe they've got one other business partner, but ideally no other business partners. Them and maybe, a couple of other people that they work with, but they are the sole decision maker. The way I would do it is something where like you pay me a flat fee, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically take the skeleton of my system. I'm going to pull out all my personal stuff, and we're going to spend an entire day together grafting my system into your world. And then for a couple of months after that, we'll get together as a group of all 10 people and share what's working well and what's not, and do that, probably have like a Discord or something like that too for those folks to work together. But ultimately I want to do it in a way where folks have a chance to, like, I want to give people a running start, but I don't think I can give you the whole thing and have it work for you. I just don't think it works that way. So I will say up front, that is probably not going to be a cheap service. And this is going to be for the business owner who's got a business they're making at least six figures. I feel like a $5,000 to $10,000 investment for a person who is making $100,000 or more I feel very confident that I can help you double your revenue or just work less using systems like this. But again, like, that's not a chasm I'm crossing just yet. That is not a business that I necessarily want to run. I just have to look at it against how much I have to look at against the value of my time in my business that I run. And if I'm going to take time away from those businesses, I need to make sure that makes sense economically. And I consider this very, very high leverage work. It has been for me, and I think it will be for other people. So that's, I think, who this is that idea is best for. And look, if I run a few of those cohorts and we learn that actually this could be built as a SaaS or could be partially or fully open sourced, I'm open to that. But the way it operates today, I'm not. So that's kind of the path that I see for that going forward. Mind your tensors, don't bother with the vector. I'm gonna be honest, I know what those words are, but I'm not sure what you mean there, Mr. Stanton. So open to that explanation there. Do I have a Discord? Indie Hall has a Discord that is for members only. I do not have an open to everybody Discord right now, and that is not going to happen anytime soon. The Discord that I would consider would be one that is, again, for a specific group of people who are part of something that we're actively working on with you for your business. But I am, like I said, email is the way that people that I'm not actively working with can reach me. And I will do my best. Again, the clearer you can be with what it is that you want, I will point you to whatever I can. Make it easy for me to help you is all I ask for. Fred says, you were showing earlier the Brie cron scheduling ships. Do you also have a dedicated page to visually show the execution status of the jobs? Yes, I do. Let's go in here. And so you may have noticed while we were working in chat, these green little dots. 3. It's 5. They're green. They're dots. When any of those are yellow or red, that's a clue that something in the system is unhealthy. And the easiest place for me to show you is probably here. This admin view is kind of like all my admin systems and whatnot. So this lets me very quickly do things like monitor CPU, memory, disk, and uptime of the server. That's handy. I have definitely run into situations where, like, a memory leak or, one of my containers crashes or whatever it is. So, like, this is meant to solve all those problems. So not only does it give me a view of the scheduled jobs, it gives me a view of so much more. So I get my sync jobs view. I think this is the direct answer to your question, Fred. I get to see every session. I have a little, reminder for myself what it does, the frequency, the last time it ran, and currently everything is healthy. If anything is anything other than healthy, I either get a warn or a down or something along those lines. I get the appropriate colors here, as well as I get Discord notifications for anything that's like critical and requires intervention. Similar, I've got one for my job queue. I've got one for my MCP servers. I've got one for, these are long-running services like the bridge between Claude Code and my client, my maintenance watchdog, and a handful of other things. The scheduler itself is a long-running process, and then my containers as well. So this, at a glimpse, lets me see. And what's cool is, those are all different parts of the system, but I can see them all very, very quickly, very, very easily. And then, down below, I've got more detailed. I'll actually show you some other cool things. So this sync status gives me a more detailed view of all of those individual jobs. Again, this admin is not cached at all because I want to see real time, but that also makes it a little bit slower. Actually, I haven't been in this page, so hopefully things don't break. Hey, look at that. Yo, we found a bug. We'll just go back. Love a live demo. MCP servers, not a whole lot to show off here other than the fact that I can, see what's running, turn them on and off, all those kinds of things. We already talked about sessions. We talked about token usage, memories. Slash commands is handy. I need to create something like this for my skills, as well as probably my agents. But what this does is I have a little job that watches the folder that all the commands are in for new changes and things like that, lists them all in here. And why this is particularly useful, besides the fact that it's searchable and I can click into any one of these and I can view it. This is currently not editable. It could be, not be pretty trivial, but this gives me at a glance, and I have a little, click to copy here. So if I want to share a command with folks or just open source it, this makes it very easy for me to pluck a component out and share that. But the really cool thing you may have noticed is these counts is that I have a hook that every time one of these commands runs, it increments a counter. And so what that lets me do is I can both sort them by things like most used and most recently used, but also when we are in chat and I run and I do slash, I've got my own little autocomplete thing here, and this automatically sorts the most used commands and most recently used commands to the top, right? So again, little bits of ergonomics that the slash preview thing, Claude Code has that, but it doesn't have the most recently used ones or the most often used ones bumped to the top. And when you've got, what did I have, 70 or 40 or whatever it was? 71 commands. What order do you display them in a way that's useful, right? And this kind of answers that for me. And I can do the same sort of thing with skills. And I actually have a little thing that I started doing recently where, and this is still a bit of an experiment, but if I type, what's one session? So basically once I'm on my third or fourth character, see the little shimmer on the text? That is it auto-detecting that the thing that I'm typing is either a skill or a command. And if I hit tab, it pops up the autocomplete. So it basically lets me do autocomplete anywhere in the text without a slash or an at prefix, which is, again, just little bits of ergonomics to make using the system a little bit nicer. And I just realized that my video was blocking a bunch of what we were just talking about. So sorry about that. Real quick from the chat. No mention of open source. I've open sourced a bunch of things. That does not mean I'm going to open source a whole system that I've spent the last 9 and almost 12 weeks building, and is very personal to me. And folks that seem entitled to that work are going to get thrown out. So let's not play that game. And there are things that are useful in here that I can cleanly open source and share, I will, and I have. That's where the smog repo came from. That is from the system that I built for archiving from Twitter into my system for links. I open sourced a really, really powerful part of my session and memory recall into a project called Kuato, and a couple of other things as well. So, don't be an entitled person thinking that you deserve access to something that I've spent a ton of time on. But if there's things that are useful, the more I hear about the specific things that you want to be able to do from within the system, I'm going to keep looking for ways to open source those components. So I think the question, would love one for the JFDI. That was a Discord. Again, I'm not running open public Discords. I'm much too busy for that. But private Discords for people that I'm actively working with, possible. Nonetheless, I think you've taken off for the day. So thanks for hanging out. An idea, I do sentiment scoring on chat inputs for dynamic mood adjustments for the prompt. Oh, that is an interesting idea. The closest I have to that right now is I have an end of day command that I can actually pull up right here, since we are here. And the end of day command looks at my beginning of day command for how the day was quote unquote supposed to go. And then it looks at how it went, right? So it's going to look at my email, the emails that I sent. It's going to look at the tasks I checked off, the reminders I checked off, look at my Git commits. It's going to look at a number of other things. I mentioned earlier, I might build a little thing that actually takes periodic screenshots of my active working computer and synthesizes that just for the things that are offline. It includes my meeting notes, which the system also does all of my meeting prep and meeting follow through for me. Looks at my calendar, all of those things. And it goes, here's the day you had. Is anything missing? And then back to your point, great big tree hugger. Your username cracks me up. It asks me, anything that I missed and how do you feel about today? And it has become this like really valuable end of day reflection tool for me. And but your point about doing like a sentiment analysis is interesting. The tricky part, I guess, is like, I'm not sure if I'll tell you what, I'm going to try it and I'll report back. I'm not sure how much of my mood comes across in the chat, maybe more or less than I think. And that might just be because I'm in like written communication mode for so much of my day. It has access to all of that stuff, but I don't know, I'll do it and I'll report back and let you know. And actually, if there are any tips you have on sentiment analysis prompting, either resources used that are useful or anything that you'd be willing to share, I'd love to see that and see what that can inspire and see if that is actually helpful. It might be an interesting thing to like, if it can guess that. I mean, one of the other kind of related ideas is, I don't wear like a sleep tracker for heart rate and stuff like that, but I do have one of the heating and cooling systems in my bed, and that does have a like sleep quality monitor on it. And I thought about doing something where, based on how it guesses my sleep quality, that it informs the system. And when it starts prepping my morning, that it decides what kind of tasks to front load based on how well or poorly I slept that day. That is technically a thing that could happen. I'm not sure if I want to do that, but it is an idea that has passed. But I do think that sentiment scoring is a neat idea, and if you have anything you'd want to share, again, drop me an email or tag me on Discord, on Twitter, or shoot me a DM on Twitter. I'll do my best to check there as well. I often forget. I got to get my robot to do that for me. The mechanics are important part of the methodology. I really appreciate that. That's cool. Thank you. Kidding about this, but you could also take a screenshot or a camera picture in the chat. And it does a visual analysis of the emotions on your face. Oh, man. That is a really good, bad idea. Is what I'm going to say, Mike. It's a really good, bad idea. Vader sentiment. Okay, cool. Is that a thing that I can look up? Let's see. Vader. Cool. All right. That's super helpful. Great big tree hugger. I'm gonna check that out, and I'll let you know. I'll let you know how that goes. That's pretty cool. All right, I have a few more things to cover, probably the next like 10-15 minutes or so. Let's go back. We only answered 2 sections here. Let's move on to the next. I appreciate y'all hanging out. This has been fun. I think I will definitely do more of this, and then I'm gonna figure out how to chop this long video up into smaller videos. All right, so this is an interesting one. Very few people have asked about what I think is actually one of the most powerful tools that I have. And it is super, super simple, but it is insanely powerful. So let's talk about what I wanted, and then we'll talk about how I did it. So I have tried every CRM tool, every relationship tool, even personal relationship management tools, and they all suck. And by that I mean, like, they're all designed around one of two things. All the CRMs are designed around sales and pipeline, and that's just not how I think about relationships. Or they're based on, at best, like time duration, which is like, how long since you've talked to this person, which is useful, and I have that too, but that was not my primary interest. The thing that I want is something that helps me manage the fluid and ever-changing dynamics of each relationship, and for help me really understand and reflect on the relationship and go, am I showing up for the person the way I want to? And I think the how long since you've messaged this person is a good start to that, but I also think it's very superficial and one-dimensional. and it doesn't actually help you do the thing that you said you want to do. And I wanted a tool that helps me show up better for the people that I care about, whether that is a family member, my partner, my friends, my coworkers, Indie Hall members, my community, whatever it is. I wanted a tool that actually helps me show up better for people. And so what I realized is, the other problem is like, I think everyone's like, well, use Clay. Clay is awesome. And Clay is probably one of the best options out there. But Clay also is like data import. It pulled in everything. It pulled in all my, it sucked in so much information that I now have a new problem, which is signal to noise, right? And so I was like, how do I start with a system that actually pulls information about actual relationships, not every contact in my inbox or in my address book that I may have talked to once, right? That's not very useful. So the idea that I built on is one that I haven't seen anybody else do this. And it's super, super simple. For me, my email is a very powerful place. And I've also used my email, the same email address for 20 years, right? More than that now. But at the same time, not everything in my email is a relationship. But most people who I have sent an email to, so the recipient of a sent email, is a very good clue that that is a relationship that I care about. And you may be different, right? That may be more like text messages or something like that. But like for me, that is a very, very high signal, right? I generally don't send messages to people that I don't have any interest in talking to. I just don't. So what I built is a little tool that once a day, it looks at all of the emails that I sent. It looks at the recipient of those emails. And I'm doing some other things for like email threads where it only counts the people who actually participated in that thread as an active recipient, therefore a relationship. But it uses that to generate a list of people. And then I have a person researcher agent that goes into my inbox and it looks for everything it can find about our relationship. And it is very, very heavily weighted on my content and context, not the things that people send to me, but the things that I send to them. It can look to other contexts, but it's a secondary thing, is sort of like backing details. And the reason for that is back to like ethics and privacy is those people didn't sign up to have their stuff pumped into a database. And so I don't want to put everything in there that is somebody else's message, but if there's necessary supporting details, it can pull those out. And what is amazing is whether it's a brand new relationship or somebody that I've known for 20 years, it's able to build a dossier of our relationship that is just truly, truly, truly incredible. To give you a concrete example without, let's see, who would be okay with me showing them? Well, I'll just show off Chris's. I'm not going to show all of it. So Chris is a friend and a longtime Indie Hall member. He's also somebody that I have been exchanging messages with for, as this says, April 2009. So 17 years? What is that? Something like that. And so using just our email exchanges, it was able to compose like this. I'm going to scroll very, very quickly just to get an idea of how much is in here. It generated all of this, right? Why is that interesting? Well, not only do I have that and that's searchable and therefore that is useful, it is also reference material for the rest of the system. And so the way this shows up most commonly for me is the thing that I built this entire system for, which includes when I save a link, when I get a link, and I'm going to show you how this works because we now have this great Vader sentiment thing. So when I save this, now you notice I just dropped in a GitHub link, no other context whatsoever. This is going to take a second, but once it does, it's going to obviously go look at what's on that page, and it is smart enough to know the difference between different kinds of links, GitHub, YouTube links, articles, news articles, so on and so forth. So it has all of that, but it's going to go look what's on the page. It's going to bring back a little summary of what it is. It's going to look for potentially relevant connections in my system. So this one says no existing connections to this project found in your knowledge base or relationships. So think about what just happened here. It gathers up all this detail and it's giving me options. We're going to save the knowledge base, build something with it, just browsing, whatever it is. But if it had relevance to either a specific project that I was working on or a specific person based on that relationship file, it would mention them here. And where that's become amazing is when I'm saving links for myself, this helps remind me of other people that might be interested in that link. And then I can go send them a note, like say, hey, I found this. You might think it's cool. And that ties back to that whole, like the whole point of a relationship management system for me is helping me show up for the people that I care about. This helps me remember that people that I know are interested in the same things that I am. And when I find cool things, they may want to see them, right? That has been a game changer. It's amazing. And that shows up in a number of other places as well, but this is the easiest place for me to demo it. In this case, I'm going to say save to knowledge base, interested in how we could tie this into the EOD command at some point. And what it's going to do is it's going to grab all that information and it's going to go generate a file. And actually, I'm going to let it do it and then I'll show you what it generates in just a second. Often I don't even give it that much information. I just say, I can just click one of those buttons. Those auto response buttons, by the way, that is a custom thing that I built. I saw that Claude Code was doing the like suggested prompt, like suggested next prompt. And I was like, that's actually a pretty interesting idea for lots of the times where it's just asking me, it's not useful for a lot of things, right? Or kind of weird for a lot of things, I should say. Where it's useful for is when there's like a yes, a no, or a multiple choice answer, and I'm just retyping stuff that's already on the screen. Why not just make it so I can click that thing and not have to, not just waste time, but potentially waste tokens too. And so it's a button, and then the button sends a version of the message back. And in some cases it sends the shortest version. If it is a multi-choice thing where I don't just want to send the yes or no back, but I actually want to send back enough context, it auto-generates that message. And that is, especially when I'm on mobile, it just keeps me from having to type yes, no, thumbs up, go, blah, 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 blah. Like it makes things that would take 50 taps take one. So huge time and probably saving me from, I mean, I'm going to get carpal tunnel at some point based on being on computers my whole life. But hopefully this will help delay that a little bit. So this saved that to personal tools, knowledge. And you'll notice it figured out where to put it because it knows that I put my GitHub links in tools usually. If this was an article, it would save it to articles, but then file it in a particular related article section. And so like if we come into the knowledge base here, you can actually see what that looks like. My tools section. No, where did it just put it? Y'all catch where it put it? Oh, it was reference tools. And then it got put in here because I've got some consolidation to do. That's one of the things that I run into from time to time is it skips. If I didn't explicitly tell it to look for a place, it is possible for it to duplicate, but the cleanup process is easy. And whenever I do a cleanup, I then ask it to create a rule that will prevent that from happening again in the future. What was it that we just did? It was Vader, right? So let me just search for it. Interesting. Not totally sure why that's not opening up, but I'm also not going to stress about it right now. We're going to go back to where we left off. Knowledge, tools, Vader. I'm going to guess this is a caching issue and this will show up a little bit later. At any rate, let's go back to where we left off. I see we've still got a decent number of people in the chat, which is really cool. If there's anyone who has not said hello in the chat yet, I would love that. Just say hey and where you're from and what you're interested in. And if you have any questions, you can go ahead and drop them in there. I'm going to hang out for, I'm going to do like 10 more minutes. How about that? It'll take us to almost the top of the hour. So the relationship management system is crazy powerful, and I haven't seen anything like it. It is a thing that has impacted my day positively every day since I've built it. It now also does things like monitoring how long since we've stayed in touch, but more importantly, it then surfaces those things at timely moments rather than just nagging me that a relationship is getting cold. And it also looks for clusters of people that I can connect to each other, which I've never seen a tool do. At least not the way that it is currently doing. So it'll notice that I'm a bunch of back and forth with a new contact, and it'll go, hey, does this person know these other people? You should connect them. And I'll go, yeah, that's absolutely a thing I should do. And then I go do that. That's awesome. So, hey, Jason, from Wisconsin, right on. All good. Thanks for stopping by. Glad to have you, of course. Let's keep going. What was next on my list? Also, I'm curious if folks have built stuff like this or are building stuff like this, and are you sharing it on Twitter or anywhere else? I'd love to check out what you're doing too. And like I said, I'm sharing this because I'm hoping that it'll inspire other people to do stuff like it. And I'm always looking for new ideas that might help me and mine as well. All right, we talked a little bit about this compounding and learning systems. There's two things that I want to show off. One is I mentioned, we talked about the memory system. I'm not going to rehash all of that. I want to show you this really simple bit of open source that I pulled out of it. This is not the same as the memory system, but it is very much inspired. This is like the simplest version of the memory system. And specifically the part where, I'll grab some water real quick. Specifically the part where, this doesn't do the automatic memory injection, but what it does do is it enables me to ask, hey, where did we leave off on this? And so where are my trigger words? They're in here somewhere. I mean, most commonly, the way I use this is, where did we leave off on this? And so like some number of sessions ago, actually, I'm just going to give you a demo. So I'm going to say, where did we leave off? So the Mac app that I'm working on with this tool, which is the thing we're going to have to save for another session. Where did we leave off last with Pear Snap? What this basically does, and actually, I'm trying to remember exactly how I've set this up. I might have to manually invoke it. Let's see. Let's just do it this way, because this is roughly how Claude works as well. Use. Because you'll see like what it was just actually, I'm going to start a fresh on, because you saw what it was doing. It's doing this thing that Claude always does, where like if it doesn't know what it's looking for, it's going to go look for a bunch of stuff and fail, and then like look for clues until it finds the right thing. I wanted to skip over all that kind of attempting to find things and point it in the right direction. So Claude works a lot like what you're seeing here. When you have it installed, you don't even need to say use sessions API. Like I said, Claude is not a thing that is in my system, but it has been extracted from my system for easier use in other people's systems. But the way that this basically works is it loads up as a skill, and then it is going to do a combination of text and vector search on whatever pieces of information that I gave it, and it's going to go find the sessions that we talked about that thing in. And then it's going to use the cheaper agent to analyze those sessions. And then it's, instead of returning the entire session into this session's context, which would eat up tons of context tokens, it then summarizes it. And so it's almost like compacting from across multiple other sessions and then injecting the useful summary into the main session. So what did it just do? Pear Snap is the name of the screenshotting app that I'm building for myself, or I have built for myself, I should say. And it says it found 3 sessions where you were building that. Let me get the most recent one so you can see exactly where you left off. And it summarizes them, and it says most recent session. Here's what you're implementing. Here's what you did in the previous sessions, and here's the current state. That allows me to basically put things down and pick them up inside of 15 seconds or so for anything that I'm working on. And again, I use this to work on most of my work now. And so this is sort of like a where did we leave off but for anything. And everything that I found before this was reliant on all of the files being on disk, which obviously in my case they are not. And if you're using this tool every day, you need to be clearing your sessions off disk anyway because it's slowing your Claude Code down. So if you open Claude Code and it does that like loading, like it takes a second, it's because it's loading up a shitload of those JSON-L files from past sessions. If you actually just zip up anything from more than 48 hours ago and move them to another folder outside of your global.claude folder, and I guarantee your Claude Code will run faster. I have that cleaning up automatically, but I don't want to lose it, so it goes into a database. That answers your question, Jason. The sessions, the last 3 days of sessions are stored on disk, but everything else is stored in a database. And so what Coado does is it gives you a sort of like drop-in version of this, where with no setup and just a single bun command, it will use the trigger words and search your on-disk files. However, again, I highly recommend this has got a really simple, it's got a Postgres container, so it's fully self-contained. And what it'll do is, this is not using embeddings and vectors. And I might add it, although I will tell you, for the way that I'm using it here, not having embeddings has not created issues for me because I usually know what I'm looking for. Embeddings are useful if you don't know what you're looking for. And where did we leave off on a thing I don't know what it was is not the workflow that I have here. I know what I'm looking for. We've just talked about it across many sessions, and trying to review all of them, figure out what the context was so I can continue is the problem. And so a basic Postgres with like weighted keyword extraction and stuff like that. It's a very, very simple startup. Basically, if you grab this repo and drop it in your Claude Code repo and say, hey, set this up, it'll ask you a couple of questions, and 5 minutes later, you're going to have a fully running version of what I just showed you, right? And again, the key here is not even the recall. I mean, the recall is obviously important. The key here is that when it's done with the recall, that it summarizes it for you. And something like this, and summarizes it in a way where I can pick up exactly where I left off. That is kind of the magic of Coado and why I think it's awesome. How are we doing on time? All right, I'm gonna do one more. So we talked about this. We talked about memories. Next. And yeah, I have tried the other memory agents, and I found that they're either overbuilt, underbuilt, or most commonly, extraordinarily developer-centric. And I get why, but also like I'm not a developer, I'm not building developer tools, and I don't want to say I don't care about development, but like that's not where I get, that's not where, what I'm motivated by. And so like I want the same idea, but applied to a broader scope of work, and I don't expect other people to build that for me because they don't understand my full scope of work. And so that's the reason I built my own. So, all right, this is actually a good point to land because it kind of brings us all the way back to the beginning, which is, doing creative work without losing the creative parts. So a couple of the questions were around this screenshot app, that Pear Snap I was just talking about, which I think I could be able to show you like parts of it. Yeah, so I've been using the same screenshot workflow, not app, but workflow for a very, very long time, to the point that like the muscle memory and integration into my workflows is everywhere. And when it breaks, it breaks my flow in really frustrating ways. And it's silly to get tripped up by a screenshot workflow, but it's true. I used this a very early, like one of the first non-native screenshot apps for Mac was an app called Skitch from a guy named Chris Pearson, who I got to know early internet days, and that's why my app is called Pear Snap. It is a little bit of a tribute to my friend Chris. And all it really, it was like the first version where you could take a screenshot and mark it up, right, and doodle on it. And it was not complicated. But it was very, very powerful. He ended up selling it to Evernote. Sad. Evernote killed it. More sad. And so for the last 6 years I've been using, or maybe longer, I've been using this goofy Russian, I think, knockoff that has worked, but was kind of having, bit rot of sorts as macOS has upgraded. I know it has broken his app and all these other things, and I feel the pain as an indie developer, how hard it is to keep up with this stuff. But it got to the point where 7 times out of 10 when I take a screenshot, it would crash. I just can't do that. And so I got this moment, this kind of fit of frustration. I was like, wait a second, why don't I see if I can get this thing to build it? And so I just described the couple of features that I needed that I use every day. That are not necessarily unique, but it's the combination of them and the specific workflows and muscle memory I have for them that I just don't have the time or desire to relearn. And so the new option that I've never had before was just build the thing around the steps that I want to take. And so here's how my app works. It is, for me, it's Command-Shift-5. So I still do have all the Mac shortcuts there, but Command-Shift-5 opens up. I get my little crosshairs. You'll notice that it is also a color picker, which is handy. That is, I get my hex, and if I do Command-C, it puts that on my clipboard. Oop, that's a bug. It's putting everything white. It is not. That's the thing I'll fix later. And then in addition to that, I can do my drag. And let's see, put it on a different screen so you can't see it. Let's put it over here. So this is a very, very simple minimalist panel. It shows what I just took the screenshot of. With left and right keys, I can go back and forth between that and past screenshots, which is pretty handy. And most importantly, with no additional keystrokes, this image has already been uploaded to my DigitalOcean droplet, and that path to that image is on my clipboard. So I take a screenshot, and that screenshot is now instantly a linked public image, which again, I use that all day, every day. I don't have to explain why that's useful. You have to understand that it's so fucking useful to me that this is the best version of it that I've ever had. Now that I've been able to add other things like the color picker and whatnot, is just the best. Obviously, I can also grab this and I can drag it, and so you can see that my Claude Code wrapper has image upload built in as well. So, it's not that I wanted. It's not that I wanted a tool to build a tool. Sorry, it's not that I wanted to build a tool. I think a bunch of people assumed that I built a tool, that a bunch of things exist like it on the internet, and I'm just building for building's sake. And that's not what this is. It's, I do creative work all day long. All of my work is creative work. My business work is creative work. I think of it all as creative work. And often the tools that I'm using get in the way of my creative work instead of helping me do my creative work better. And so Pear Snap, the JFDI system, and all of it, the way I think of it is, has one job, or sometimes several jobs, but all versions of it. My goal is to make it so that when I sit down to do my work, my creative work that I love to do, that brings value to other people and makes me money sometimes, that the things that would be in the way of me doing my creative work, I can hand to the robot. That's my goal. When I sit down and do work and I feel some resistance, I go, what's in the way, and can I give that to the robot so I can get to the part of the work that is actually good for me to do, is necessary for me to do, is valuable for me to do. And that's really, really at the heart of it. So that's why we're choosing those kinds of things. Now, what made me choose Claude for Mac app development? I have chosen Claude for everything. And it's, at this point, it's just it's the tooling that I know. it was amazing to me that I could use it for Mac development. I thought it'd be way harder. But I was blown away by, basically I said, hey, I know that I can do a Mac app in Xcode. Can you help with that? Or is there a better way to do it? And it said, hey, if we write it in Swift, Xcode needs to be installed, but we don't even need to open it. And that was another like light bulb moment. I was like, oh, I can build Mac apps the same way I build web apps where I am comfortable. And I will say, when it comes to like debugging stuff, I have so much more to learn, but I know I can ask it for help. So it's not that I chose Claude Code for Mac development, it's that I'm choosing Claude Code for everything right now. And I'm waiting for it to find a thing it's not good at. And I haven't run into one since like Thanksgiving, which is crazy. As my friend Dave here said, the hard part is tweaking Swift UI manually when you barely know what you're doing. I feel that pain, but I'm using it as a learning tool. Yes, I am still going. I'm glad you got a good walk in. Was it Damidina? I'm wrapping up in just a couple of minutes. And what is my kind of final point? For me, the bespoke tools like this, they fit like a glove because I got to design the glove. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't write that analogy. It did. It's spot the fuck on. That's exactly it. It fits like a glove because I got to design the glove. And I get the sense of people that don't want to design, and I feel like that is a loss. That's a bummer, because design is not about the visuals of it. Design is about taking a moment to reflect on what is the problem and what the solution could be, and using these tools like collaboratively to figure out those solutions and then actually be able to build them is, I don't know, it feels like a magic trick. It's the coolest. So, all right, I'm gonna wrap up here. This has been 2 hours on stream, and my throat's getting a little sore. I've got a phone call to make. But thanks for hanging out. And I'm gonna go through the chat one more time before we go. What you build is fantastic, addressing problem, too many information silos. Yep. Building a version for yourself, long way to go. I mean, look, this didn't start the way, this started as that, that thing that I just showed you probably 15 minutes ago where I can drop a link and it auto files it. That's what I built. That's the first thing I built. And once I watched that work, I was like, oh, well, what else can we do? And there's so much else that was able to go from there. So start small and build. The relationship manager assessment. Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page there. I'm going to start scraping videos like this. Super insightful earlier. Yeah, I mean, I do the same thing. When I see videos or something interesting, I'll grab it. I'll grab the transcript and I will learn from it. So I hope you learned something from here. And if you build something with it, shoot me, tag me on Twitter or wherever. And I'd love to know what you took and what inspired, and, good open sources. Like when you take something and you run with it, you try to give back. I'm trying to do that, and I would encourage you to do the same. Will I leave the video up? Yes, I'm going to leave the video up. My workflow in one sentence, and what are you building next related to this in another sentence? My workflow in one sentence. Ooh, that's good. My workflow in one sentence would be: find the work that keeps me from doing, find the important work that's needed to do my work and give that work to the robot so that I can do more of my work or just work less overall. And then what am I building next related to this? That's a great question. I have so many things that, I think I want to, now that I've built this little Mac screenshotting app and I realized how easy that could be, I think I want to build something that talks to the web app version of JFDI and the assistant so that I can do some things, not everything, but I can do some things with the system without even opening a web browser. Right now I have to open a web browser or on my phone. There's like a mobile, like this is this web app is also set up to be a PWA. So it is saved to my home screen and it is fast and it is powerful from my phone and it is mobile optimized, but there's sometimes I don't even want to open that app, I'll do a raycast extension instead of building something from scratch. I'm not sure, but something, I think a Mac app, and then maybe a phone app, to your point, might be the next layer on top of it in terms of new features. But the truth is like, my goal right now is to use this thing, not to build this thing. My goal is to spend more time using it than building it. Building it is fun, but using it is the point. So that's kind of where my head is there. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for the great questions. Thanks for hanging out. This has been fun. I will definitely do more of this. Hit subscribe on YouTube if you want to get notified about the next one. And, follow me over on Twitter as well. And hope to see all of y'all in the next one. Have a great rest of your weekend, y'all.